Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Anyway, hi everyone. Thanks for coming.
Welcome to a live recording of What Spoilers at SpoilerCon 2022. Very excited about that. And we're joined by Jason Denzel, our guest.
Hello, thanks for having me. Glad to be back.
Always glad to have you, Jason. As always, when you come on, I have to say you were the first person to see the podcast when we posted about it, and you retweeted us and got us probably our first 100 listeners, like way back in the day.
Wow.
Jason runs Dragon Mount. He's a confidant of Sanderson and Jordan, I'll say. Maybe you can correct me on that one, but...
I don't know if I was ever Robert Jordan's confidant. That would have been really kind of cool. I think we were more like email buddies for a while and such, which was pretty cool, you know. And
I wasn't sure how you wanted to qualify that.
Yeah, sure. And then with Brandon and I have been friends for a long time and such. And when he was working on the Wheel of Time, I remember, I'll never forget, it was the night that he finished Towers of Midnight, and he was texting me at like 2 a.m. And I said I'd be up, and I knew he was getting close to finishing, but he was texting me at 2 a.m. He's like, quick, how does Matt get out of the Tower of Genji? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I remember what he said, but we were going back and forth on ideas. He's like, okay, I got it. And then like 3 a.m. and he's like, I'm almost there, but I need to know how Tom, blah, 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 you know? And so it was kind of fun to like live that adventure in real time in that way.
Oh, that's incredible. It's incredible. But also you've been writing your own book series. And I think the final book in the trilogy comes out, about a week after this episode publishes. So mid-October. Yeah.
So, Wheel of Time has done a lot of things for me. I've always had an interest in, my own writing and being a creative individual, and I've been doing filmmaking for a while. But, obviously with the Wheel of Time that, put me into the world of publishing for a lot of years. And so, long story short, eventually I had a book that was ready and I sent it on over to Tor Books and they loved it. And so they've now published 3 of them now. The trilogy is complete now with the latest book, Mystic Skies, that finishes the series that began with Mystic. And it came out in 2015, and there was Mystic Dragon, and then now Mystic Skies to wrap it all up. So that comes out October 11th, which should be right around the time, I guess, that this podcast is going to come out. And in addition, if you're new to the Mystic books or haven't heard of them or want to check them out, the first 2 books, both Mystic and Mystic Dragon, for limited time anyway, for through the end of October, are on sale for $2.99 a piece. So it's an easy way to jump in if you're new to the series, want to check it out, or to support an up and coming fantasy author.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we've got 2 of your books in the auction as well. We believe we've got Mystic Dragon as a paperback and Mystic Skies as a hardback. And we'll go ahead and get those sent directly on to the winner of the auction item.
Yep, that works perfectly. So, I'm excited to be here, and as always, and I think that these books, although they're a different style than the Wheel of Time, they're not big, long 24-hour audiobooks, you know what I mean? But they are available in audio too, and they're read by Mary Robina Kowal, who of course is amazing, and they're fabulous. And there's it's hard to separate out, a lifetime of being a Robert Jordan fan from my own writing, you know what I mean? And so whereas there isn't a cast of thousands of people across this series, very intentionally so, I haven't got, I have a lot of books I want to write, and I don't know if I'm really firing in all cylinders. I'm really rolling and a lot of stuff cranking up. I didn't want Mystic to be something that would take 20 years, 25 years to write and with a cast of thousands. So, but I think that a lot of the way that I write characters, a lot of the nuance, a lot of that is pulled from having a lifetime masterclass in Robert, and the way in writing characters and plot twists and that sort of thing.
You're taking a page out of Brandon Sanderson's book, which is writing an original trilogy that feels like a self-contained story. But later on, we'll find out.
You never know. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've thought about it's not in the book I'm currently writing, but I've actually gotten ahead of myself a little bit. I'm working on, I've got some stuff for 2 books out. I'm writing a standalone epic fantasy right now. Now that I'm done with Mystic, I'm writing a standalone epic fantasy, a big chunky 300,000 word, big thing. And that's pretty cool. That's got a pretty big cast, a big enough cast where I have a character glossary in it, and so that's pretty exciting. But when I get stumped on that, I have been looking ahead to my next project in it. And in that one, my point here is that the main character has a cat, just a regular house cat, and that cat's name was Pamela. And Pamela is the name of my main character in the Mystic books. And so I'm like, right here, this is how I'm linking all my books, all my series together, is I'm just going to have, everyone's going to have a pet. That's it. Everyone's going to have a pet that is the name of the previous series main character or something like that. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, you ready to dig into chapter 13?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, this chapter is a lot of fun. It's a good one.
It's a great chapter because it's Codswain and Varen, right? A lot of Codswain, and then Forsaken.
Yep.
And there's so many good little nuggets in this chapter that it's a great one.
Yeah, and I remember reading the first time. There's so many chapters where there's cool stuff happening, but it can just be like there's like a desert wasteland. All of a sudden, it's like, a Forsaken chapter. Yeah. You're really excited to, something's happening here.
And this is a lot of the Forsaken too. Like all the remaining Forsaken, they all come together, and well, not all of them, but like you've got.
No, they're missing a couple.
Yeah. Well, it's all the reborn ones.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Ray, do you want to read us in?
So, chapter 13, wonderful news, and our symbol is the rising sun of Kyrian.
Yep.
Because
this takes place in Kyrian.
In Kyrian.
Yep.
All right. The Sun Palace's sunroom was cold, despite fires roaring on hearths at either end of the room, thickly layered carpets, and a slanted glass roof that let in bright morning light where snow caught on the thin mutants? I do not know that word. The thin mutants did not...
Muttons?
It's not muttons. The snow caught on the thin mutants did not shield it, but it was suitable for holding audiences. Cadswain had thought it best not to appropriate the throne room. So far, Lord Dobrain had remained quiet about her holding Caroline Taimandred and Darlin Cisnera. She saw no better way to keep them from going on with their mischief than keeping them in a firm grip. But Dobrain might begin to fuss over that if she pushed beyond what he considered proper. He was too close to the boy for her to want to force him, and faithful to his oaths. She could look back on her life and recall failures, some bitterly regretted, and mistakes that had cost lives, but she could not afford mistakes or failure here. Most definitely not failure. Light. She wanted to bite someone.
The pretty ones always do.
I love Cadswain.
Yeah.
She just wants to bite somebody. It's such a mood.
And I love how she refers to, that she's got these political prisoners or whatever. And, and she refers, what does she call it? Their mischief or something like that. It's like the big, complicated, machinations of all these, people they're up to, but she just thinks of it as mischief.
I gotta say, I fell in love with the first 3-4 words. The Sun Palace's sunroom. The sunroom in the Sun Palace. Jordan must have been messing with us on that one.
That feels like the kind of thing, like, I feel like as a writer, that's something that like I would draft in the first draft. I would just write it, not think about it. And then an editor would catch it and say like, dude, like, you see this here, like kind of like saying, the walking man walked across the street or something. Maybe not quite like that. But yeah, we all know, like, especially especially this stretch of books, books 9, 10, and to an extent 11, they were fast forwarded through the editorial process. Jim would write them, print them, hand them to Harriet, and say, "Let's get in the car." And she would edit as they were driving to New York, to New York City, and would hand the manuscript over in person, and Tor would go with it and run with it and print it, and you had a book in your hand 6 weeks later. It was like absolutely insane kind of time frame. Yeah.
Well, how does that mesh up with the fact that he was taking longer between books to publish them at this point in time as well? Wouldn't it seem like that would allow more time for editing?
Yeah. So I mean, the rush in terms of the 6 week thing was, I don't know if it was a book 9 thing. It was definitely book 10 and book 11. I don't know how much of it was pushed in book 9, but what would happen is that, they would ask him, when are you going to be done? When are you going to be done? And he would say, I don't know. Maybe around here, maybe around there. And, those books sold so much that to this day, they sell so much that they keep the lights on at that publishing at Tor, and or certainly in those years. And now these days, Tor is, the lights are kept on by a mixture of, Brandon and Robert Jordan, who still sells even better, especially with the TV show. It sells better than ever. It's insane the amount of books that get sold on a weekly basis, even like book 9, thousands and thousands of copies every week. Week in, week out, all year long. It's insane. But so what would happen is that the publisher, Tom Doherty, who at the time was the publisher at Tor Books and the president, would say, okay, Jim, give me a date. And he'd say, well, I don't know. I think I can get it by, sometime in October. And as October would approach, he'd say, okay, well, he's got a business to run. He's got to figure this stuff out, right? And say, okay, I'm going to reserve the printers, wherever our printers, they're going to clear the line and they're going to reserve all of those printing machines, because we got to make 1 million of these books, print around 500,000 or 1 million or whatever it is. We're going to do this. I need to reserve it in advance. And so they're going to charge it as soon as, whether they're printing or not, they're charging us. Right.
Right.
And so it's coming out in October. You're saying you can have it done in October. So tell you what, October 15th, let's make these days up. October 15th, I'm going to tell them that we're going to reserve it, and we're going to reserve the printers for however long it takes. Right. So then once he makes that reservation, then Robert Jordan is on the clock to deliver. And so I think that they would get to that point where he was ready to go. Now, I know that you're asking a great question. Why didn't he just say, I'm going to need another 6 months to do the edits on top of that or whatever else? I think what happened is that he kept fiddling. He was a guy who liked to keep revising it, and and so he probably, maybe what it was, maybe it was January, right? I'm speculating here, but it was January. And said, I'll have it to you by October. And so Tom reserves, those printers for October, 10 months out or something insane. But then October comes and he's still fiddling with it. And, so then that's where the urgency kicks in.
Meanwhile, Harriet's tearing out her hair, being like, come on, Jim, get this done.
All right. Yeah. So I don't know. I think Harriet had a much heavier hand in editing in the early stages. And then, of course, in the late Brandon books. But even then, she knew that Jim could write and was a great writer. And sometimes, you just get out of the way, so I don't, it's always kind of been Harriet in her process have always been rather opaque. That's just her style. And so we don't really know exactly how much of a hand she had in more than just line edits and big picture stuff. I know, like a lot of things, even after he died, I remember talking to her and she was like, yeah, I knew some things about the story, but I didn't know a lot. And I don't know, for the people close to me in my life, I'm like telling them everything that happens in my book. They're probably sick of it. So if I did keel over, my kids probably know every detail about the book and could finish it or something. So
who knows?
Neil, what's up?
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, go ahead. Ask questions. Jason, did you hear that?
I think I got it, but why didn't you repeat it just for the podcast and everything?
So, despite Robert Jordan being a prodigiously good author, did he ever have moments where he was procrastinating or writer's block or just stormed out or just couldn't get the words onto the page?
Despite being a prodigious demigod.
Right.
Yeah. He certainly, there is certainly a whole mythology that, of how we imagine him. And, I suspect that he, he's human, right? We all have writer's block. I think writer's block is a very common thing. But I get the sense that he probably had it less so than probably certainly than me. But the impression I get is, or let me back up. One thing I have certainly realized from my own writing is that momentum is huge. If I have a really good writing day, like on a Monday, then I'm likely to have a really good writing day on a Tuesday and so on. But if I go a couple days without writing, if I go a week without writing, which sometimes happens, I mean, for myself, I've got a full-time job, I got kids and, and everything, right? So it can be hard to do that in addition to running Dragon Mount and everything, right? So if I lose that momentum, it takes me a while to get going. It's like, the older car, it's got a cold engine, it takes a while to get it going again. Robert Jordan, certainly I'll say, when he was at it, when he was writing his fastest, this is like in the 90s, the early 90s, when he was writing books 3, 4, 5, 6, when they were coming out every year, right? He was writing 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, and sun up to sundown. And he just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, and he was in it. And to the point where Harriet would call him, because they have their main house that they live in, and then in their backyard, more or less, on the property, they've got a separate carriage house that had converted it, an old carriage house from, were common in the South, and that was converted into an office and living space. And she called him on the office line. She would call him a lot and say, "Come in, I've got something, I want to show you." And so he'd reluctantly get up and, grumble about, having to leave his work. And she'd go in and she would hand him car keys and a fishing pole and go, "Get out, go fishing, go fishing." And that was like a thing that, that she would do quite often. So what I'm getting at here is that he was I know for years, he was so immersed in it. He was so plugged into it that I think that he had that momentum going. It was like he was flowing with, with the winds at his back and everything. So, I also know from talking to his assistants and, Harriet and Alan and Maria over the years, that he was the kind of guy who I think the way that he distracted himself was fiddling around on his computer. I guess he pushed every button on every button he could find on his computer screen. They said, he was always breaking his computer because he would fiddle with the printer settings. He would fiddle with the audio settings. He would fiddle with every button in the preferences, every button in Microsoft Word. He would click it, push it, click it, whatever, and you could see that, right? You'd see, those kind of people. Maybe you're one of them if you're listening to this. And so he would do that. And I think that sounds like a form of procrastination, kind of go down that rabbit hole. And the other thing too is that we all know how extensive his notes are. We've heard about these notes, right? That there were more words written in his notes than there were in the printed book series. So, what is it? How many, 4 million words or whatever in the Wheel of Time series? Is that what it is? Something like that. And, to think that there's more than 4 million words of notes out there is absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Right. And how many of them are correct? That's the other question, because some of them are definitely wrong.
Yeah, and they definitely contradict each other and everything else.
Yeah. Well, because you sit down to make notes about anything, you're always going to end up contradicting yourself and by changing the things and making Taimandred not Taim, which is just a terrible mistake. Yeah. Yes,
I know, and we'll see that a little bit in this chapter too.
Yeah, definitely.
As I was reading that chapter, I'm like, oh man, this is really showing itself. But yeah, so to, kind of wrap it up, I think that writing those notes were his form of distraction too. And if he got stuck on something, I could see him going, the way that I like, if I get stuck sometimes, like when I'm writing, it just happened to me recently. Like, I'm like, this character is not working. I don't know what to write for them next. And I'm like, and I really got to the heart of it. And the heart of it is I didn't know this character's backstory as well as I should have. I was trying to kind of get away with just kind of skimming on, I really need to open up this secondary character's background. And so I went down this rabbit hole, and it took me 2 days or whatever, writing a whole document of like who this character was, what their background was. And most of it will never be in the book, but it helps me to flesh them out. Mm-hmm. And so I think Robert Jordan did that on a huge scale, and eventually, especially with all the Aes Sedai stuff, I think that's why he, as we get into the longer book 10s of the world, where book 10, where there's so much focus on the Aes Sedai, so much on the politics of the Ajas and everything, that these were things that he loved about the series. And because he'd been writing about Rand and Perrin and Mad and Egwene for, 15 years at that point or whatever it was, I think he needed that break mentally. And I think that it was more interesting and fresh and exciting for him to write all about all the White Tower stuff. And so that's why we had, a lot of what's in this book, Winter's Heart and Crossroads of Twilight. And then, of course, New Spring, which was, he's like, okay, I'm just going to do a whole book on it, before coming back and saying, okay, I've had enough fun with the sidetrack of the Aes Sedai spin-off stuff. Let's get back to Rand, Matt, and Perrin and our regularly, scheduled Wheel of Time show. And that's why book 11, Knife of Dreams, felt so much more focused.
So speaking of getting back to focus, I think we do only have another hour, so I do want to actually talk about the chapter we're working on, which, by the way, I can't help but read it as in the Futurama. Wonderful news, everybody! Like, yeah, it's not wonderful news.
It is wonderful news. Yeah. It's that cross-gender healing can fully restore someone.
Oh, that we have. Okay,
that Dahmer can heal.
That's right.
Still. That
news.
is wonderful news.
There's a lot of news in this chapter.
Swain.
I wasn't sure which one. Well, I don't know if that's a good idea actually, because then you're at the disposal of men who can channel, and they're corrupt and evil. So that's bad.
So about the Windfinders.
Do we have to talk about the Windfinders? So Shallan has gone off with.
No, not Shallan. It's Talon. Shallan is the sister, Talon is the apprentice. Yeah, Talon has been stolen. Oh, I demand the return of my Windfinder, but it's not Shallan, because Shallan is the one that goes to formatting, right? Back me up, somebody. Shallan is the one that is in the chapter to lose the sun.
Yeah, Shallan is the Windfinder, Shallan is the apprentice.
Yeah,
Yes.
but why does she say I demand the return of my?
hiding under the bed?
Yeah, Shallan was hiding under the bed, and Codswain has kidnapped her and is holding her prisoner so she can blackmail him, because what's been happening is basically in this whole chapter, Rand tied him up and put him under the bed.
Right.
Codswain discovered them. She's been saying, hey, you know something about this. I'm going to hold you hostage until you tell me. And she's been procrastinating because she's married to some guy back home. And if the people around her found out she's been cheating, she's in big trouble.
Right.
So that's not Talon, the apprentice, who got kidnapped and wanted to be accepted and go to the White Tower because she didn't want to work for. Yeah, it's like the Windfinders are confusing or something.
I've literally always read this as being angry about the apprentice being stolen and not connecting it to the word Windfinder on the page.
So, but yeah, no, it's easy because Shallan, Talon, they're both are disappeared.
They both vanish at the same
time. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Shallan is being demanded to be returned. Hareen is yelling at Cadswain. That's pretty much what's happening.
Yeah,
a lot of yelling at Cadswain while Cadswain thinks angrily. I love how Cadswain says, if she had to concentrate on them with her full attention, they wouldn't like that. She's like, it's good that I only have half my attention to spend on them. Otherwise, I would really tell them what I think.
Yeah, I think she's right about that.
Yeah.
We get a little interaction between Eben and Daegion, and they have not been bonded yet, as far as I'm aware.
Really?
Yeah, they bond later in chapter 25. Oh. So this is sort of flirting, pre-bond flirting.
They're engaged to be bonded?
I thought they had recently bonded. You've been covering the series more recently than I have, but
she says she is very possessive of him.
Right.
I thought that they all bonded when the attack on the Sun Palace happened.
I'll put it this way. We know that he's bonded in Winter's Heart chapter 25. It's possible it's happened already, but it's confirmed in Winter's Heart chapter 25. So that's later.
It happens because of the attack on the Sun Palace, and they're all renegades, and so they go to the Aes Sedai for protection.
Got it.
But Rand doesn't get that memo until quite a while after.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think that's how that works.
So we find out about it later, even though it's already happened.
But
wonderful. Thank you, Rev Jordan. We've got the 5 sisters who are hanging out with Codswain, and those are the ones who were, I believe, compelled by Varen, correct?
No, because Varen only compels the ones that were kidnapping Rand. These are all this is the Saladar embassy.
No, these are all Tower Aes Sedai.
Really?
Eldine.
Myrcella and Marana are from Saladar.
Oh, so I'm talking about Nasun, Sarene, Erain, Beldine, and Elza.
You're right. Those are the ones that
Those are all Tower Aes Sedai.
and they all swore already.
Yes.
Right.
They're sworn to Rand.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Because, they've now been brought into the fold. So now they're allowed to play nicely with the Saladar Aes Sedai.
And that's where Codswain is constantly saying, I'm confused about their motivation. I don't understand why they would swear. In the beginning, she'd been inclined to accept their various explanations, but over the last few days, that inclination had taken hard knocks. The reason that she doesn't trust their inclinations is because they're all based on compulsion.
Right.
And so Varen and Codswain is sussing that out.
Yes. Another one of my very favorite Cadswain lines. She has always believed the spirit of the law was far more important than the letter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, Cadswain.
That's a very Codswain thing to say.
And then there's another one of my favorite lines about an Aes Sedai. It's about Nasun, a brown who would climb into a box with a scorpion if she wanted to study it.
Yeah. You might say that's true of Varen as well.
She did
Yeah.
climb into a box with a scorpion to study
A lot
it.
worse than a scorpion.
Right.
She became a scorpion. She's like cosplaying as a scorpion.
So, and it's hard to really know what to say about all of these characters because they're all in the room, but they're not necessarily doing things. It's more Codswain is having thoughts about these people. So it's hard to not just get in lists of people and be like, here's who's in the room, this person and this person and this person.
It's a moment when I think we could be getting a lot of Seafolk content. It's a lot of Seafolk stuff, but then it never goes anywhere. So it doesn't feel relevant. But like, if there was something that happened to the Seafolk that was cool, this would be foreshadowing for that. There's a whole, like, the one sail mistress might like jump off a cliff if her, ordered her to, like, those dynamics could mean something if we ever saw this group doing anything.
Right. And they don't. So this would be interesting, I think, if these characters were more active in the last battle, other than generic sea folk.
Yeah.
And then also, so just as we get plenty confused with the Aes Sedai and the Windfinders, we have the Aiel show up as well.
Right. Just some wise ones. It's fine. It's fine.
But the wise ones show up with an important piece of plot device.
Yes.
Which is?
This will help you sleep.
A cup of tea.
A few drops will help you sleep, and a few more, and you will not wake.
Isn't that amazing? That's like, and you never, ever, ever even think about it when you're reading it. Like, I mean, certainly in the year 2000 when this thing came out, 2000 I think is when this book was published. Like, talk about the long con that Robert Jordan had going.
Right.
There were fewer notes than I think people suspect that were left for Brandon to write with. But this was something that was very meticulously detailed out, and so it's awesome that he had this, so many years before it finally would actually come out.
Well, and I think the red herring he throws at us is when Varen thinks about poisoning Codswain because she thinks Codswain might be a threat. And you're like, oh, that's why she had the poison. Mm-hmm. And so then you dismiss it. It's out of your head. You're like, oh, well, this poison isn't important anymore.
That red herring has
that red herring
away.
Right, yeah, that's okay, whatever. And then to bring it back for the poisoning of her own cup is just so brilliant. And you're like, oh my God, when you see that line, it's hard not to look at that and immediately go like, that dress is green. Like,
yeah.
Varen, by the way, has pulled out her flowering brooch, which is her angreal. You'll notice she's carrying that around. We've only seen that once before, and that's when she was doing compulsion. So she only really brings it out for some of the harder weaves that she's been doing, which makes me think that maybe she's been doing a little more compulsion out in the tents on some of these other. That's why these last three have finally given in and decided to swear along with the rest of them. Varen's been out there. And like Codswain says, Varen's been taking to her apprenticeship like a duck to water, right?
Weird. How much she likes being a captive and studying these Aes Sedai.
Yeah.
No, just brown stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
So lots more compulsion going on, in my opinion.
More of Cadswain being amazing. No, she would not stand the wave mistress on her head here and now. I love her like, no, I won't turn you upside down. It's just It's not that anyone has trapped Cadswain, it's that they are trapped in there with Cadswain.
Right.
So amazing.
Yeah, and the next couple of pages is a couple of basically Codswain putting the Windfinders in their place.
I do not care a fig for your Cormor. If they offer one uncivil word, spank them both, but be diplomatic about it. I love it. I love her.
If you ever touch me again without permission, I'll have you stripped, striped, bound, and carried back to your rooms in a sack. That's a interesting way to say that.
And Kate's delivery on this whole thing is just whip crack.
Yeah.
Kate on this is like, oh no, hide under the table. Someone's mad at me.
I think it's one of the reasons I love the audiobook so much, is even on these sections where like maybe I don't necessarily have a lot to really like enjoy about the dialogue, the way Kate delivers it is just really, really good. And she adds a whole layer. You know, I say it again, it's like any Shakespeare play. And this is actually something I took away from talking to Michael Kramer, because he was like, I asked him, sorry, it's a tangent, but have you ever, do you ever not want someone else to narrate these audiobooks? Do you have possession over them? He's like, absolutely not. It's like a Shakespeare play. The words are as they are written, but the performance is something entirely separate from the way the words are written on the page. And no one can reproduce what I do as an actor, even though the words they might be saying are the same. And I'd love to hear how other people, what their take on it is and how they interpret it. And that's very as interesting to me as the words themselves.
Yeah, that is fascinating. That's cool.
Oh man, listening to Michael Kramer at WatCon was great. He was like a wise old sage dispensing wisdom to the people who were sitting around his feet. It was very prophet-like.
He pontificated. It was beautiful.
It was beautiful.
So then we go down through the three reds that have chosen to serve fealty.
And this line, they had not been allowed to speak to another. There could be no collusion. I accept their pleas, yet they all plea within the same 12-hour period. Again, Varen compulsion, right? Varen went and visited them all. That's where the collusion came from.
Right. She does think about how it takes different amounts of time for women to find like their reasons. But yeah, the Reds were the last because probably she went for them last, right? She talks about how hard it's going to be to do.
Because they don't trust her.
Ones. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Is there a specific, either in this book or elsewhere, do we learn specifically how Varen learned compulsion?
She talks about it the first time we see her using it. And she says she pieced it together from half-forgotten weaves from women who wanted their daddy to buy them something. Right. So she doesn't get it from another Black Ajah. She's actually piecing it together from interviewing
Aes Sedai over the years.
Novices. Yeah.
Novices or aspiring novices.
Yeah.
I see. That tracks a little better. Like, I mean, you would think the low-hanging fruit, if I were writing this, like it would be like, oh yeah, the low-hanging fruit is, a Forsaken teacher, or she learns it from another Black Ajah or something.
Right.
But more true to the character that she researched the hell out of it and pieced it together. I like that.
And it explains why her compulsion is so haphazard, right? They have to trust her. She can't make them do anything they can't find reasons for within themselves. It takes a very long time. It has this like two-step process where she does all the weaves and then she pulls on two threads and then it collapses and she tells them what the orders are. And it's a very complicated, kludged together version of compulsion.
Yeah, not the clean, Forsaken, Age of Legends trained, like snap the fingers. It all like just snaps and boom, it's done.
Exactly.
Complete, which is cool.
And Varen also thinks that Cerelia is formidable and that she's very glad that she's on their side. It's just Varen, the double agent, talking to Cadswain, we don't know what she's doing, talking about Cerelia, the most badass wise one. It's just these three old crones. Just like, how can we make this young boy not ruin the world?
Right.
That's right.
And I like her line about Cerelia. Everyone thought they were becoming friends, which they might yet, she realized in surprise. And that's very interesting. Codswain and Cerelia actually becoming friends, right? There's a whole
colleagues, they're professional colleagues.
And there's some real respect on both sides.
Yeah. And she's like, we might be friends, but I still might have to kill you because our goals are will be different.
Well, sure. It doesn't mean we're not friends.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
I can't wait until we finally see this, maybe not this specific scene, of course, but until we see this dynamic played out in the TV show with, amazing professional actresses playing these amazing characters and just the dynamics. I mean, it's going to be wonderful to kind of see that happen,
So we're all pretty sure we know who Codswain's going to be, right?
Well, I mean,
We riot if not.
I know. Yeah, probably. It's a matter of what season they're bringing her in.
It was. They basically announced it on Twitter, right? Like she was.
I'm choosing to believe that.
Yeah.
Nice. So next I've got the whole sordid tale between Shalon and Ailill. We get the reveal of the fact that after a little gentle questioning, which coming from Varen could be literally anything. I don't think it was gentle personally. They hide the secret for days and days, and then Varen convinces them to tell her that in fact they're having an illicit affair and it's the worst thing in the world and all their social capital is gone and boo-hoo. I said I don't care.
That led to meetings, which led to friendship, which led them to becoming pillow friends.
Just a phase.
Yeah, as much from loneliness as anything else. Because if they weren't lonely, they would have never become pillow friends. Because that's what pillow friends are. Apparently,
I do like though that he's got the diplomat who's on a multi-year mission away from home who just can't help but like sleep with someone on mission because like she's lonely and she misses her husband. Like that one piece of humanity that the sea folk managed to have. Ailill, I don't have as much. There's no backstory for her, but Shalon, I like that.
That's her. Well, it comes back to his situational lesbianism with the pillow friends, where it's like it's only when you're in the tower and there are no men. It's only when you're on the long trip away from your husband. Like it does sort of create this situationalness to it that I don't necessarily like.
I'm going to erase that in favor of bisexual representation.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I'm going to take my bi representation.
Yeah.
There's it's a whole other podcast, probably show, as you well know, that dynamic. But I choose to I think I like to look at it in the context of the time, of course, that, this is no one else at this time in the fantasy genre was writing, same-sex relationships, of any kind, really, and other than heavy male gaze fantasy type creepy stuff or whatever, I
do always have to bring up Mercedes Lackey because she definitely had a couple of good representation.
That's fair. Maybe I shouldn't say no one else. I shouldn't say that clearly, but it
was super rare, and certainly from a male author, it was almost unheard of.
Yeah, it was progressive for its time. Yeah. That does it, and then you can get into the whole, does it, is that still justified today, or whatever, but he was trying. I think given him an A for effort.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Or at least a B+.
Yeah.
So they turn this illicit affair into an opportunity for blackmail that I don't think ever goes anywhere, but Cadsuane sinks her claws into it anyway.
I think the important line is she'd already used it on the 3 Ashaman. And I had a lot of trouble coming up with what blackmail she had on the Ashaman. Because those were the 3 that Rand left behind, and they weren't technically traitors, but I think at one point he did put them on the traitor list.
Taim puts them on the traitor list.
That's right.
But I think that the blackmail she's referring to is part of how they end up bonded. Because we don't see it on screen, I'm not exactly sure how it plays out, but something to do with the 3 Ashaman needing to be bonded and her claiming to have blackmail on those things fit together somehow. Yeah, but again, I couldn't find. The only thing is that maybe that Rand abandoned them and that he thought they were threatening. That's the only thing, That doesn't feel like blackmail. That just feels like a threat.
Yeah, it feels like if she told anybody about it, they would be on everybody's shit list.
I guess
that's the best I can come up with.
Yeah.
It's just that they got left behind after the attack on the Sun Palace, and
so she tries to get blackmail in on Ailill as well, which doesn't go anywhere, and also on Shalon, which kind of goes places because Cadsuane and Hareen are in kind of a power struggle, and Shalon and her ability to be a spy conduit is kind of the tug of war that they use to see who can get on top of that power struggle. So it doesn't really go anywhere, but it does give Shalon a lot of consternation.
Right. Because the power struggle doesn't really end up giving anybody more power.
No.
Right. Yeah.
It just shows off how amazing Cadsuane is. Wonderful news.
Wonderful news, yeah. I have the most wonderful news, Codswain. By the sound of her, she was not at all certain how wonderful it was. See, wonderful news, everyone.
Wonderful news question?
Yeah. I know you said I should keep Damer busy here in the palace, but he insisted on looking at the sisters still in the Aiel camp. Mild-tempered as he is, he's very insistent when he wants to be, and sure as the sun, there's nothing that can't be healed. And well, the fact of it is, he's gone and healed Igraine. Codswain, it's as if she'd never been, she trailed off, unable to say the word. It hung in the air even so. Stilled. So yeah, and this is where we figure out, if you hadn't before, that a man healing a woman gives her the full amount of power, and that's why Igraine is fully back to power, because she was healed by a man, and Damer Flynn, and that's why
when Nynaeve heals Swan and Lyanna, it's reduced.
It's reduced.
It's a woman healing a woman.
And why when she heals Logain, he's got full power.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he gains back all of his power.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this kind of proves that one experiment is like, what's going on here? And this is like, oh, it's a cross-gender thing.
And there's a word from Robert Jordan where he said, no, that it is like when you're trying to, it's like Sidene repels Sidar, so it creates this frictionless surface that you can channel across. But if you have two of the same, they attract and it's sticky, and so you can get less power across that bridge.
I'm a freaking physics nerd.
Oh yeah, Robert Jordan's a huge physics nerd.
Such a physics nerd. So they decide they're going to heal everyone, regardless of affiliation, because being stilled sucks. And then they talk about, well, are we going to have to punish them the way the other Aes Sedai have been getting punished for, beating up Rand and all of that? And no, apparently being stilled meets all of your toe, meets toe that cannot be met. And so they're just good to go. They're a blank slate as far as the Aiel are concerned.
And these are the women that Rand stilled when he was breaking out of the chest.
Right, these are women who were actively holding the shield on him, the worst of the worst. But because of what happened to them, the Aiel are like, nah, they're good. If they can live through this, they're fine. I
mean, and in a lot of ways, that's because they've been literally they've had them on suicide watch for months, right? They've literally been trying to keep them from. They want to die. They want out.
Now we're going to marry you off instead.
Yeah, marrying you off is going to fix that problem, of course.
I can see that perspective though from the IEL. I could see it's the, especially because they're showing their own empathy. Hey, we dread it so much. We know it's worse than death and all these things, right? And there's a kinship between the people who understand, the women who understand, and the people who are stilled. And so I can see how they maybe, not I don't know. I'd give them community service, a light community service or something rather than, a full pass. Right. But I see that. And I like that shows a bit of humanity in them.
Well, and I think marrying them off too can work if you're thinking about something like Lan and Nynaeve, right? That's going to save him from committing suicide. If there's actual love and care there, sure, a marriage can help.
Well, they do say finding a husband, not marrying off.
That's fair.
They do imply that there's a matchmaking process that they're going to go through.
Okay.
It's implied.
But I don't imagine that the subjects have any decision making in that.
If Sorelia tells you you're in love with this person, you are now in love with this person.
That's fair. Yeah, she changes reality. Yeah,
now it's your choice. It's your choice.
Do you think she could light the pipe at the end of the series just by thinking about it?
You think the pipe would dare not light?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Okay. Next thing I have is Jahar running in. Jahar Narishma. Bells are clanging.
So which means he's where are the bells from? Arafel. He's Arafel. Yeah.
Yeah. So Narishma comes running in. Arafel and bells are jangling because Alana just passed out because Rand just got triple bonded and is now having a very good time, and Alana is checking.
She has the vapors.
A triple dose of the vapors.
Yeah, I'd actually like to know at what point in the process did she pass out? Was it the bonding, or was it what happened after the bonding that really?
I think it was clearly after the bonding, because Robert Jordan's a dirty old man, So.
But yeah, Alana has just passed out and no one knows why, and so they all just go and cluster around her bed to collectively have a panic attack until she wakes up.
Because it means something's wrong with the dragon. is basically what that means.
Right.
Yes.
And they don't know what.
Right.
So, but I'm convinced it is just the bonding, though.
It's got to be, because we know that Rand, the real estate in Rand's head is finite, right? So when 3 more people move in, the other 2 people, Moradin and Alana, get pushed out a bit. So I imagine that Alana is passing out in response to having her stake being reduced. Makes more sense than just Rand getting laid. Maybe it was a really good lay.
The thing is, it wasn't the first time that Rand had sex with someone. So, and I guess she hadn't passed out from other instances. So.
Right, yeah, because Rand and Min have been sleeping together.
Right, this whole time.
Since before the bonding.
So as much as it's a fun joke, I do think it's the actual bond that causes the problem.
Yeah.
So they're rushing off to get to Alana, and then they get another piece of news because Jordan had to stack his walk and talks like Russian nesting dolls. So we've got the news of it's Darlin, right?
Yeah, Darlin.
No, it's not Darlin. It's
High Lord Darlin and Lady Caroline.
Yeah, who's speaking? Why am I forgetting who's speaking right now?
Dobraine.
So Dobraine walks up and says that Darlin and Caroline are no longer under house arrest under Cadsuane's control. He has formally busted them out and sent them off to go do their thing. And he's just letting her know that happened so that she doesn't freak out and get mad at the servants and like make heads roll. He's like, I did that, so chill. It's a really weird thing to just stuff into the middle of rushing to Alana's room. But
yeah, I mean, it's like, you're busy, by the way, I did that thing that you don't like. Bye. Like, it really is dropping the news on a Friday afternoon and then piecing out for the weekend.
I could see that the first draft probably didn't include that. And at one point when he was editing, he probably realized, crap, I need to put this in here for consistency. I got to find a place to cram it in. This looks like a good spot. We'll put it in right there.
It definitely is crammed in there. Yeah.
it's just a hallway crossing. It's fine.
Yes.
Because Lord Dobraine was given basically permission to run the entire city by Rand before Rand took off. He's Steward. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, didn't he say that Dobraine should maybe allow High Lord Darlin to be free? Am I making that up?
I don't know what you're talking about.
There was a scene where he gave Dobraine the letter and said, "You are now High Steward."
Oh, you'll
and he
know
said,
when to deliver
and
it.
here's another letter for somebody else. You'll know when to deliver it. And my interpretation is that was for High Lord Darlin when he was going to go become, because he goes and runs Tyr for Rand.
Is that what he goes and does next?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
And so my assumption is that that letter is what Rand gave to him, and that was all with Rand's permission and based on the letter that he gave him.
That makes a lot of sense. I've never been able to piece that together, so I'll take it. But that makes a lot of sense. You'll know when to deliver it.
Yeah. Well,
When you decide to release him from Cadsuane's custody,
right.
give him this letter so he knows where to go next.
Right.
I like it.
Let me double check on that, though.
Okay. And so, yeah, he says they're beyond your reach, and Cadsuane says, well, don't count on it, but whatever. We'll see how that goes in a year. She doubts that it's wise. I think it's a great idea, honestly. Cadsuane controls too much. Cadsuane needs to let go of a few things.
So, yeah, by chapter 25, Darlin now rules in the Stone of Tyr.
Okay, so that's got to be what that
That's
letter
what
is.
he does.
There's
Because Tyr is still loyal to Rand.
Yeah, I mean, as much as tyrants are loyal to anyone.
Right. So I assume that Darlin must have shown up with a letter from Rand being like, I get to be ruler now. See, here's my letter. Right. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a golden ticket.
Right.
I've got the dragon's ladder. Okay, so they get to Alana, and Ivan says she seems afraid to wake. I don't know what that means. Like,
I don't think she likes the
afraid.
bond.
You don't think she likes losing bits of Rand?
Yeah. Yeah. Alana and her relationship with Rand is something I've always really puzzled over. The constant crying, the weeping for no reason. Is it just because he's in pain? Is it because he's not giving her attention? We don't get any internal POV from her, and then she dies.
I always got the impression that it was a release of stress. Like she bit off more than she could chew, and she was in over her head. And although because Alana, of course, is this amazing character, she's so strong and everything. But when she went too far and bonded Rand against his will, then it became something that overwhelmed her. And the pain that he's holding on to leaks into her, the stress, everything. I think that collectively just, that was, as a reader, that's the impression I got, is that it just crushed her over time, Now, why Alana, a woman, is depicted this way, as weeping and crying, and Rand is rock hard and doesn't weep or cry, it's a discussion point for sure. But
sure.
And I hope that maybe it humanizes her a bit too, to kind of show like even strong are more than just stone, and everything, and that, she has moments of weakness. And of course it would be, to someone like Ivan, she would, he would know, and these kind of things, and it would know when she was most vulnerable.
I guess the other way to interpret it is that Rand should be crying and he's just shutting those emotions down, and she's reflecting his actual emotions, which is just constantly sobbing and being miserable. So, because we see that true. A lot where Warders and Aes Sedai mirror each other, and maybe she's just mirroring his actual emotions. Neil?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, this is probably quite speculation, but we know that in the past, Aes Sedai did bond Warders against their will, and now they don't.
Right.
There's the possibility that maybe if a Warder is sufficiently stubborn and really doesn't want to be bonded, then that has side effects and consequences that the Aes Sedai realize would be detrimental to their own, their own.
Yeah.
Maybe one of these kids, if you have someone like Rand or someone like Perrin, who just have such strong will, then the bond, there's some kind of internal friction, and that it just makes sense now for Aes Sedai to bond people who are either.
I would argue that it just became cultural not to do it against their will. I don't. If there's any side effects to that, I would say it's because Rand can channel, not necessarily because he's got a strong will. Right? That seems to be really what prevents her from using compulsion on him and a few other things. So it seems like maybe that backlash of emotions is more because he's on equal footing because he's also a channeler.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that I don't necessarily think that there is any. To use lack of a better term, there's no magical consequence for there being resistance to the bond. But going with that idea, let's just say for instance that there was, I think there'd be a difference between trying to bond a person who didn't necessarily want it and was resisting and saying no and leave me alone, and Aes Sedai was persistent and eventually bonded him anyway. There's a resistance and shield there. Versus Rand, there was no resistance. It was a surprise, like boom, boom, like you're bonded, surprise, and there was no chance for a resistance. There was no defense. It was just slapped on them.
Yeah.
Any defense had to come after the fact.
Yeah.
She's also still really emotional for Warder.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a great point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a really great point.
I forget that that's actually something that takes a long time for them to get over, because like we see Suan who got over it, we see
Leanna talks about how long it took her to get over hers. And it's been less than a year for Alana, and with Aes Sedai it's like it takes at least a year, a year. So
been out and about, right? Most other Aes Sedai
she's been in survival mode.
That's a good point. Shall we talk about some Forsaken?
Yeah.
Tea party.
The Forsaken tea party. Yeah.
Coffee hour.
All the reborn Forsaken are here. We've got Sindain, Ishamael, now Moradin, the Osangar, and Arangar.
Got both the Gars. For once, I can't get them mixed up because they're both here.
Gar.
We've also got Taimandred, who hasn't been reborn, but
he gets reborn in the last 3 books as a totally different character.
And Grandal is also here.
And Grandal's
reborn.
She will be. Hessalam.
Let's see. We start with Taimandred being angry.
Mm-hmm.
And we get the little note about what the Taimandred Semirog Masana relationship is, which is a simple agreement that they would not turn on each other until the others had been eliminated. But it has lasted since the War of Power. They literally have had this going on, I think, since the War of
Oh,
Power.
you think that was before they got?
Either that or it was the day they got out. But I feel like there has to have been some history from the War of Power where it was like, yeah, we'll turn on each other later. And then they all got sealed. They pop out again. They're like still turning on each other later. That's how I assume it goes.
I definitely thought it was post imprisonment.
Okay.
Specifically because they've got Semirog dealing with the Shan-Chan, Masana in the continent dealing with the Aes Sedai, and then you got Taimandred dealing with the Sharans. So they've each picked a continent, right? Like you've got Westlands, Shan-Chan, Shara, and those are sort of the three continents. And they're like, yeah, we're going to split that up and stay out of each other's hair.
I want to jump into this real quick on that. All right. So this was the book, context here, that this was the book where, in the concluding chapter that you'll get to here, that Robert Jordan straight up hammers us over the head and says Taimandred is not Mazrim Taim. They are not the same person, right? But this was also the time when, the year 2000, this was right when at the peak of everyone saying, we got you figured out, Jim. Like we see clearly they're the same person. And this is, you can argue it and people debate it to this day, but to me, and there's the notes that support this, and some notes do, some notes don't, just like you were saying earlier, Seth, right? That, it seems pretty clear to me that at some point that initially they were the same character, that they were, and it makes perfect sense. It is a wonderful place to put one of the Forsaken, is to put him in charge of the Black Tower. That's absolutely brilliant. And I kind of wish he had stuck with it, but for whatever reason, maybe because the fans, figured it out too quickly, or maybe he thought of something else or whatever. We know that, by this point in writing the book, Robert Jordan decided, okay, they're not going to be the same person. But we get these lines in here that you were referencing about, how you were supposed to have, the Black Tower was supposed to be under your, like you were supposed to have this taken care of or something, right? I forget exactly what the line was, but there was some reference. Someone chides Taimandred and says, like, they were your, like, I've got my charge under control. Your charge isn't under control.
That's Arengar.
There you go. Yeah. And so, Arengar is based, and it makes sense too. Context. Arengar has got Egwene under control. He's got, Saladar, the rebel Aes Sedai under control. So what about your faction? It would make sense that it would be, the Black Tower in this context. That's what we know and everything. I love Brandon Death, and I love what he has done for the Wheel of Time. I think that Shara was a miss, and I think that was, personally, and I've said that publicly before, I think I've probably even said it to Brandon, I think that although it was cool, the reason I say it was a miss is because of chapters like this where there's no context in Shara, and no one cares about Shara as a reader. Shara is cool, but Shara is not part of the story. And so no matter how many times, like when I was rereading this chapter, to prep for this podcast, I'm reading this, I'm thinking, there's no way Robert Jordan is thinking, oh, clearly, he's off having adventures in Shara. He's building, this is a completely different thing. And
the way he got around that is he said, well, Taim was recruited by Taimandred, so anything Taim did is still Taimandred in the end. So that's, do you have the Black Tower under your thumb? And he's like, is your guy, he's like, well, my guy's in charge of it, right? Like, surely I have it. So from that level of collusion, you can say, well, they were working together the whole time. So even though they're not the same person, that's why Taim came up with so-called Aiel. That's where, a lot of the sort of overlap and attitude comes from. But you're right. It's hard to see this and be like, Robert Jordan never thought they were the same person.
Yeah. But, at the same time, now that I've been critical of it, I will back off a little bit and say, like, okay, put yourself into Brandon Sanderson's shoes. You've got no notes. There's nothing. There's not, we have some notes that contradict each other, but there's nothing that says where Taimandred is. Like, you are a writer, you've been tasked with finishing this, and there's no satisfying collision. Like, yes, I know fans, other people like, Brandon follow the same notes, like, that people have pieced together, well, by process of elimination, it could be this person, it could be this person. And really, drum roll, the answer is Taimandred is some obscure king in a country we don't care about, and maybe that's who he was supposed to be or whatever. But if you're Brandon and you're trying to make books that people are going to like, you're like, this is not a great answer. Like, we got to come up with something better than being the king of some country we don't care about. Let's make him sharp. Like, let's go to that kingdom we haven't heard about.
And my counterpoint to that is Rivers of Fire that got cut. River of Souls that, that was a short story, and that's how he made you care about Taimandred. He introduced you to Shara. He gave you this whole story, and that should have been in, A Gathering Storm or, something like that. And yes, it would have ruined the surprise of the Sharans popping out at the last battle, but it would have given us a structure to care about the Sharans at the last battle and to care about Taimandred.
That was a Harriet cut. And I think that the real thing there was that I think what it was is that there was a concern that it would be so compelling that there would be a heavy call for, we need 13 books featuring Taimandred as, as his own dragon in his other place. And Harriet didn't have time for that, So, and I think that's kind of what it came down to.
Yeah. I mean, she's not wrong, but we're also calling for 13 more books about, Matt in Shan and Perrin in the Ways. So, I know all that stuff, we can call for it all we want, but it's not getting written.
Yeah.
Fanfic writers.
I think there's a great line here from Taimandred. The Great Lord only knows what else is crawling towards us by horse or sheep or whatever else these savages can find to carry a message.
That's a fun line.
I love that line because it shows us how ineffective the Forsaken are in the modern era when they don't have the infrastructure that they're used to having around them. Same is true of Osengar. There's a line here where it's, if not for his particular skills, he would never have been chosen. But his skills are working in a high-tech lab, right? He's useless outside of his high-tech lab.
And that's exactly... Yeah. I mean, imagine you are changing up a little bit. Imagine that you in our modern day, 2022 or whatever, something, the apocalypse is happening and you are the Dark Lord's hacker. You can hack any website, you can hack any government, you can get in, and then boom, 3,000 years later, you wake up and there's no computers. There's no electronics. You can't even get a power outlet anymore. And suddenly you are the guy's hacker, and what the hell? You're useless. You're, what are you going to do for the Dark Lord if you don't have electricity and you were their lead hacker or whatever, So same kind of thing applies here. He was, like you said, he was the microbiologist, the mad scientist, and now, we're back to carts and ravens.
And what's even funnier is he is one of the most powerful in raw power Forsaken. He has all that raw power at his disposal. He just doesn't know what to do with it.
I have to give his credit, though. When he first woke up, he's like, oh, there's this great source of Saidin being channeled, and there's this guy that doesn't know what the hell he's doing with it. Maybe I should go there. Oh, look, I have a buddy. Let's go take care of it. Now I can be the hero and take out the dragon or whatever and get access to this untainted source of Saidin. So, I mean, to his credit, he didn't really know any better.
He thought on his feet very quickly when he first woke up.
It was a good idea and concept, especially since he had Roddy Boy next to him.
This is one good idea for this age.
Yeah.
And the two of them had been watching the ages, right? They have more knowledge of...
They were a little bit awake. They were mostly sleeping.
Yeah. Mostly dead.
They had lucid dreams of the time passing.
Right. So they had some idea, a little more context than maybe some of the other Forsaken who had just woken up. Although I'm in Eye of the World, I'm convinced only those two had woken up, and then later, I think in the Great Hunt, we see most of the rest of them break out.
I agree with that.
We talk about that back in those episodes.
So we go from Osengar being exactly the same as he always was to Arangar being the opposite of everything.
Yeah, but still at the core.
Still the same person, but just all the mannerisms have changed. Whereas, the one still does the same dry washing of hands. The other one is now in slut era. It's such a departure, right? It's the same person, but one, it's like Swan and Lyanna. One goes right back to being a blue. The other one decides to experiment with being a green and having a slut era. It's literally the same thing.
Okay, but here's the thing. Arangar, before when he was Bethalmel,
Was still in
was
slut.
still
No, that's
in
a
a
good
slut,
point.
was absolutely,
Yeah,
except
he
when he was a
was-
man, it wasn't a slut. He was just a guy who slept with a lot of people.
Player.
He's a player, because we call those two things different. But the sexual drive has not changed,
No, yeah, you're right. You're right.
especially towards women.
The body language, right? Like they describe it here,
Yeah.
just like the physicality of these people have changed. But yes, they're still both, yes, they're who they were. And the whole thing where Arengar starts like really seriously flirting with Grandal is just so creepy because it's like Grandal, of all the people to get creeped on, Grandal's the appropriate one, right?
Yeah.
It's so appropriate for how can Grandal get creeped out? Who could possibly creep out Grandal? This is the only person in the whole world who could actually creep out Grandal.
Right.
And I like it.
Great point.
Because I guarantee Grendel had turned down Thalmel many, many, many times.
So many times.
Yeah.
It was like a party trick that happened
Right,
so often.
right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's just funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's so weird. I don't like seeing creepy stuff happen except when it's bad people on other bad people. It's like, yeah, no, go for it. Be creepy.
Speaking of bad people on bad people, there's a line here where Osengar is saying, Chance can't protect Rand forever. Next time he'll be taken or killed. And then if you think to how he dies is during the cleansing when Elsa just burns the whole hill down, where it's like, yeah, guess what? Chance took you out. That's what Chance and Taviran does to you, is it's going to kill you. That's what's going to happen. It will protect him.
But what they're discussing here is the possibility of the cleansing happening. That's
Yes,
what this discussion
right.
is about, is can Rand cleanse the source? And if he can, what does that mean for the male Forsaken?
Because remember, he said that in front of the Ashaman, and that prompted the whole attack on him in the Sun Palace at the end of the last book, right? Like, the idea that he's going to cleanse the source is, the Dark One's no-no. Like, he's willing to let Rand go ahead and play with nations and gather armies and recruit people and learn the channel. And he's all fine with all that, but you try and cleanse the source, the Dark One's going to be pissed.
I had forgotten about that. That was that. So that's what motivated that attack in the Sun Palace. Then was that because Rand let it slip what he was planning there. That's really, I missed that the last time I read it.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty subtle point that I think we only got by doing the podcast as we were going through.
It's
and
a new revelation.
It's a new revelation. He said it in front of somebody, and then there was a remark overheard in the Black Tower where they're like, well, we can't let him do that. And then it's of those 4 people that later then go on to attack him. And then plus.
Yeah. So now the Forsaken are like, no, we got the memo. We gotta fix this.
Right.
This is bad. The Ashaman can't take him out. Like.
And what Morden basically says is, be aware, be prepared. And the second he starts doing it, you will feel it. And then you will go there and you will stop him wherever there happens to be. We don't know. We can't really, we've seen him in every city. He's given us every false lead. We don't know where he's going to do it. We don't know how he's going to do it. But when he starts, there's no way he can hide it. Right. And so at that point, we're going to track him down and take him out. That's Morden's plan.
Yeah. But the real impetus for this is that half the channelers in the world would no longer be controllable. And that's a problem.
Yeah, it's sort of a little interesting. Like the female Forsaken are saying, do you think the Dark One would trust you now that you are no longer beholden to him to get clean Saidin?
Yeah.
Which is like, well, but you aren't beholden to him to get clean Saidar. Why does he trust you? There's a bit of a like
double standard.
Yeah, double standard there. Yeah, where it's like
it's funny.
He needs the tainted one power to keep men loyal, but not women.
Well, no, I think that it speaks to the vanity of the overconfidence of the women, thinking like the only reason that the men, or Taimandred and these others are, not traitors is because he's holding them on a leash with this threat of the taint. So it's the Forsaken talking shit about the other Forsaken, to each other.
No, and there's actually a really interesting line here where it says, during the War of Power, more than a dozen of the Chosen had died of the Great Lord's suspicion, which just tells you, like, the Forsaken we have now are the 13 most powerful of the Forsaken, but there must have been like 100 of them at one given point.
And this is the first and only time, I think, in the Robert Jordan books that the topic is brought up, that there were more than 13 at one point. which is really interesting. Yeah.
I feel like there's one other time earlier on when they say something like, the 13 most powerful Forsaken, right? Which implies that there were less powerful Forsaken.
A glossary thing. Yeah.
Right, the glossary. Well, wasn't it? Didn't we get a number where he said like something like you were only the 29th
36.
person who's ever had access to the true power?
Yeah, Grandel says that to Moradin. When she first
Yeah.
meets him. No,
Yeah.
Moggy says that to Moradin.
Right, because
What
Moradin
book is
shows
that?
up.
That's
What
when
book is that?
that's when Moghedian comes out of the vacuole. I don't know what book that's in.
I think it's the previous book, so I think
I
it's
think that's last book.
yeah,
Path
last
of
book,
Daggers.
Path of Daggers.
Okay.
Where basically she says to him, because
Only 27 people have ever something like that.
so I don't remember the exact number, but it's in the
Not many.
Yeah, not many. But basically, we obviously have to subtract one off of there because she's counting Moradin and Ishmael as two different people.
Right.
So so it's a little confusing as to the exact number, but the assumption is that, or my assumption was that basically what made you chosen was that the Dark Lord granted you access to the true power at some point
early on.
And that's those were the difference between the Dreadlords and the Forsaken. Is Forsaken could channel a little bit of the true power.
You were chosen to have my direct power.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. That's where the chosen comes from. The Dark Lord chose you to channel the true power.
Taimandred does notice Grandel's little gold ring.
Yes.
We get that mention of the fact that Grandel's wearing something plain, which is not a thing you would associate with Grendel.
It's an angriel, right? Or
Just a small
angriel.
Just enough to tip her up another level.
Which is not the Forsaken have been desperately searching for Angreal, and they have not found very many, right? Like that was the whole thing with the cache in Tanchico, right?
And Ebudar.
Ebudar.
All the caches everywhere, really.
Right,
Yes, the Ebudar one.
Some interesting information from Moradin.
Yeah, Moradin walks in and starts info dumping.
Right.
Dramatically.
Right. The whole thing with the rat that he burns on fire, that's just creepy.
Yeah, while talking about Fane and Esam, it's like, this is all meaningless and terrible.
What it does tell us is that Esam has been assigned with killing Fane, which we knew from, that's the whole reason he was in the Two Rivers, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's back, a book 4 callback is like Slayer has been tracking down Fane. Yeah, that's the whole reason killing Perrin was just a bonus. He was there to kill Fane.
So it's basically because Fane went rogue, Isam has been sent after him.
Right.
And because Fane is like a third party now. Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, Slayer, that's why he's sort of been non-involved in other parts of the story.
Because he's been chasing down like this little Dark One wannabe,
right.
Fane person, Mordeth Reborn. Interesting. Yeah. We get our mention of a butterfly effect because, of course, the butterfly stirs its wings on a branch, and on the other side of the mountain, a mountain collapses. It's dramatic.
It's a very philosophy, right? Moradin is the philosopher who talks about the butterfly and the chaos theory and has ideas about how that.
Theory.
Yeah.
He was probably the kind of person that would be either really fascinating or super annoying to hang out with at a bar and have a beer with. He'd probably be the guy who would sit down and just start talking about all these philosophies. And if you've been drinking a while, you're like, yeah, I'm into it. And you have this great conversation with them. Otherwise, you're like, oh my God, who is this guy? Get him out of here.
He's fascinating after 2 drinks and annoying after 5.
That's right.
But still better than the guy at the pool table that keeps trying to buy everyone drinks and pool sharking. Bathamo?
Yeah. Or the nerd in the corner who can't stop talking about work.
Okay, now we just need an entire bar scene of caricatures of the Forsaken and who they would be in a bar.
This chapter is the closest we're going to get to that. It's not far off.
No, yeah. It's the Tea Party for a reason. Yeah.
Coffee hour, whatever.
Taimandred is insisting everybody do shots.
Yes. Okay, so we learned that the true power is only being given to Moradin now
because he's Nameless.
Right.
He's anointing. Well, he's anointed as Nameless, right? So he's in control of the army. He's in control of the battle. He's in control of all the other Forsaken. The Dark One is consolidating his forces for the final battle.
And then he sort of hands the mic off to Sindane to explain the PowerPoint about why this is going to be a bad thing when Rand does his thing. It's very much like, Yeah, turning over to the other presenter. And then she's like, you remember the Chodon call? Next slide, please.
Right. You remember how they're going to destroy the world? Yeah, he's going to do something really risky and terrifying.
And they all freak out.
Right.
Because none of the other Forsaken knew that this plan was coming, but they didn't know how feasible it was until the Chodon call got brought up.
I wouldn't even say feasible. I think at that point they're like, okay, he's actually playing with nukes that he could destroy the world with, right? Like, it doesn't matter what he's trying to do with them. If he messes it up, we are screwed. Mm-hmm. And like, big difference between Morden and the rest of the Forsaken. Morden wants the world to end. The rest of the Forsaken want to rule over a conquered world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they don't want it to end.
Right. That would be bad.
This has a little bit of a vibe of like a Star Wars, like, sir, we've analyzed their attack strategy and there could be a danger to us, to the Death Star.
Yeah. We've analyzed the plans and there is a weakness. Yeah. And you're like, what? Our battle station has a weakness? Yeah, it does. Mm-hmm. It does.
So let me get this really interesting, like, smoke and mirror song and dance thing between Grandal and Taimandred about this?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it starts with him being like, Sindane's not Lanfear, is she? I was convinced she was, but then she's not very powerful, so she can't be, because that doesn't change. But otherwise, I would totally think she was Lanfear, and it's like, yeah, she's Lanfear, she's just weaker.
Right, because the Finn are not a thing that he calculated for.
Right, yeah.
The Finn eating your ability to channel is not a thing the Forsaken consider. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they do this whole like big dramatic blow up about how they didn't know. And it's funny because I always feel like the Forsaken didn't know about the Chodon call, but then there's this like Grandal Taimandred, like I guess they did know about it. I don't know what the end of this tea party is all about, honestly. I don't. Why does Grandal need to blow up at Taimandred fakely?
All right, my theory is she didn't know about the Chodon call, but knew if she blew up at Taimandred, he would think she knew about them, because she likes to play him like a fiddle. And so she's like, okay, if I act in a way that makes everyone think I knew about these Chodon call, that'll give me an advantage, because they'll think I knew about them. It's very convoluted. I'm pulling this out of my ass.
All right. Well, it is Grandal, so.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's very convoluted.
All right.
Yep.
All right.
Right.
Okay, so then we've basically got Morden being like, I don't care if you kill Rand or not, just as long as you try. That's the important thing, right? Is that you try to kill him. Maybe he'll die, maybe he won't, but you have to try.
I wonder if if Morden, I wonder if he was thinking to himself, like, meh, you guys can try. He's going to take a few of you out. Let's see what happens here.
That's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
Yeah,
Right. And that's Morden. Killed? If it comes to that, yes. But he's like, you're not going to.
Yeah, he's like, you can try.
You can try.
I would love to see you try.
He's got the Chodon call. He's got Kalendor. He's got Cadswain, some of the most powerful female channelers.
He's got Nynaeve. He's got Olivia. He's got
Elza. Yeah. No, it's. And they go in as loners, right? Like, they don't go in with a group of a group of people to help them out. They don't go in with circles. They don't go in with any of their troops or anything like that. They just go in as no teamwork. Yeah, it's not like the Taimandred's forming a bond with Semirhage and
anyone.
Well, I was going to say three people. Masana. Yeah, three people. It's like, why not go in as an alliance, right? Like,
well, I think that was the whole point. I think that was a very deliberate thing that their pride was so great, and they were so, like, think about, Taimandred especially, like, there's no way Taimandred would, and we see this is consistent even in the books, when he comes from Shara and the final books or whatever, he's out there taking on anyone, calling out Rand and stuff, but he's doing it solo because he is so freaking powerful, Although I did think, like, what's the timing of him finding that super awesome Cyan Grail? He must have found it after the cleansing, I guess. I forget what the timing is, because why not bring that thing?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, he would have brought Sakarnan to the cleansing if he had.
Yes.
Yeah, my assumption is that basically he got Sakarnan like a day or two before the last battle. Like, he got that and then immediately rode to battle in the last battle, right?
Well, maybe the cleansing happened, and he's like, "Well, now it's worth going after that big Cyan Grail."
Yeah. That's a good point, because Then he can channel a bunch of power and it'll be clean. Won't drive him insane.
Maybe. I don't know.
So I think I'll read us out.
Yeah.
All right. So, it seems he must be killed after all, Taimandred said. Hiding his satisfaction was not easy. Randall Thor or Louis Theron Telamon, he would rest easier when the fellow was dead. Before he can destroy the world and us, which makes finding him all the more urgent. Killed? Morden moved his hands as though weighing something. If it comes to that, yes, he said finally, but finding him is no problem. When he touches the Choden Call, you will know where he is, and you will go there, and you will take him, or kill him if necessary. The Nabliss has spoken. As the Nabliss commands, Sindane said eagerly, bowing her head, and echoes of her ran around the room, though Agenor sounded sullen, Osengar desperate, and Grendel oddly thoughtful. Bending his neck hurt Taimandred as much as speaking those words. So they would take Althor, while he was trying to use the Choden Call, no less. He and some women drinking enough of the One Power to melt continents. But there had been no indication that Morden would be there with them, or his twin pets, Mogedion and Sindane. The man was Nabliss for now, but perhaps matters could be arranged so he did not get another body the next time he died. Perhaps it could be arranged soon.
So bitter. He's so bitter.
He's so bitter.
So petty.
And again, that goes nowhere. Like, we never see him like try and kill Moradin or try and prevent him from getting a body. I think he just goes off to Shara. And,
I think he goes off and gets to Karnan.
Yeah.
And then yells for Rand to kill him on the battlefield the whole time. But it's funny. Mogedion and Sindane do go.
Yes, they do.
Like they do both go and
They're both definitely told they need to go. So, I'm not super surprised that Taimandred reads the room wrong, but he definitely does read the room wrong.
Yeah. Brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Jason, for joining us for this.
My
Really
pleasure.
appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I always love being on these shows. I think
We love having
so
you.
great.
Yeah.
So I'll be back. We'll pick another chapter for the next book. I'll be there.
Okay. Awesome.
And congratulations again on your book coming out.
Yes.
Definitely all of the information for that will be in the show notes for this episode.
Yep. Yeah, I appreciate that. And just real simply, if you're just listening, or just jasondenzel.com, all the links are there with, about the early books. If you're listening to this and it's still October 2022, you can get the first couple books inexpensively. But otherwise, they should all be out. I hope you enjoy them. Thanks for reading. And, we'll talk about whatever's next up whenever I'm back on next time.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jason.
And thanks everyone for being here live.
Yes, thank you for live. Yeah.
And thanks to everyone who was in Discord. I know we had people in Discord.
Yeah, we had a nice good. Yeah.
Thanks everyone so much.
Couldn't always pay as much attention to Discord today as I usually do, just because live audience and limited screen space. But thank you for
now
showing
I can
up.
see everyone. Yeah, I can see everyone now. Hello, you've been looking at me, but nice to see you all.
Yeah, do we turn the camera around so you can wave to them?
Yeah, I need to get it on. I need to get next year's event on my calendar. And for those who are, I was telling South earlier, for those who are, if you're local-ish even to the Portland area, I'm going to be doing a book signing on October 17th, Robert Jordan's birthday, in Portland at the Powell's and the Beaverton store. So if you're in that area, then you can check my social media. I'll put up reminders and stuff. But October 17th, Robert Jordan's birthday, I'll be doing a book signing there at Powell's for my own stuff.
Awesome.
I'm just going to say, outside of Portland, you got to be careful. Those Portlanders might come after you if you say Beaverton is part of Portland.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, sorry. I know, because when at first, they my publisher told me like, you're good to go for Powell's. I'm like, great, going to Portland. And then later, and I told somebody else that, and they're like, which store though? I'm like, there's more than one Powell's? So that's where I learned about the Beaverton store. So how far out from actual Portland is Beaverton? How far out is that?
30 minutes.
30 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, it's suburb area, clearly.
Yeah, suburb of it.
Yeah, I think I think the Beaverton Powell's specifically is like more of a 45-minute drive out. It's just a little bit further out in Beaverton.
So not the Powells we're all potentially going to tomorrow.
Right.
Different Powells.
Different Powells. But again, in any major city, a 45-minute drive from downtown is still considered part of the city.
Yeah, and from what I hear, the one in Beaverton is is especially science fiction, fantasy friendly, and they do a lot of events and everything. So
yeah, well, and I know that's like Brandon's like first stop. That's where I met Brandon, actually. Yeah. So I know that's a very popular one for the authors.
is that the one with which is it the main Powell store, or is the one Beaverton that has the giant post with all the signatures on it?
Yeah, that's the main Powell store.
That's the main Powell store.
Yeah. But I do know what Sanderson said basically is the one in Beaverton put his books up on display when he was an unknown author, before he'd written anything Wheel of Time related, when all he had was Mistborn and Elantris and Warbreaker, and they basically put his books up and for everyone to see, and really supported him when he was an unknown author. And so that's one of the reasons why now, all these years later, that's like always his first stop on the West Coast. Yeah,
that's true.
So that's the story
awesome.
He told when he was signing books there. Yeah. And if you look at his tours, it holds out. Like that's always his first stop, right? It's amazing how much he supports that store for supporting him.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I like that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
I'm gonna drop here, but thank you so much. It was nice seeing everyone there, and
Thanks, Jason.
I'll see you guys. Yeah, I'll see you guys next time. So thanks so much.
Definitely.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?